December 19, 1944. A cold interrogation room in Oberstdorf, Germany, 18 months after the war ended. General Hasso von Manteuffel HAH so von Manteuffel sat across from American intelligence officers, the former commander of the 5th Panzer Army, the man who had nearly won the Battle of the Bulge, the man who had surrounded Bastogne with overwhelming force. They asked him about George Patton. Von Manteuffel paused, looked down at his hands, then spoke words that would echo through military history. We did not believe it was possible, not in those conditions, not in that time. When we learned what Patton had done, how fast he had moved, we knew the offensive was finished. He went on, "In all my years of warfare on the Eastern Front, fighting the Russians, I never saw such a maneuver executed with such speed and precision." This was not flattery. This was a professional soldier, one of Germany's finest tank commanders, admitting that he had witnessed something he could not explain. In 48 hours, George Patton had done what every military expert said was impossible. He had disengaged an entire army from active combat, turned 90 degrees north, moved over 100 miles through freezing blizzards, and smashed through German lines to relieve the surrounded city of Bastogne. He captured over 10,000 German prisoners in the process, shattered 3 German divisions, and single-handedly turned the tide of the largest battle in American military history. The German generals who faced him would spend decades trying to understand how. This is what they confessed, and why it changed everything. To understand what Patton accomplished, you first need to understand what he was up against. December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest, a quiet sector of the Western Front. Allied commanders believed the Germans were finished, beaten, incapable of major offensive action. They were catastrophically wrong. At 5:30 a.m., over 200,000 German soldiers launched Operation Watch on the Rhine, 25 divisions, nearly 1,000 tanks, 1,900 artillery pieces, all concentrated against the weakest point in the Allied line. The attack achieved complete surprise. Within hours, American units were overrun. Entire regiments ceased to exist. The Germans punched a bulge 50 miles deep into Allied lines. Hence the name. The Battle of the Bulge. Hitler's plan was audacious. Drive through the Ardennes, split the British and American forces, capture the vital port of Antwerp, force a negotiated peace. And at the center of this plan was one critical objective, a small Belgian crossroads town, Bastogne. 7 major roads converged at Bastogne. Whoever controlled those roads controlled movement through the entire region. The Germans knew this. So did the Americans. On December 17th, Supreme Allied Commander Dwight Eisenhower made a fateful decision. He ordered the 101st Airborne Division to hold Bastogne at all costs. These elite paratroopers were rushed to the town by truck. Many arrived without winter clothing, without adequate ammunition, without armored support. By December 20th, they were completely surrounded. Let me give you the numbers. The 101st Airborne numbered roughly 18,000 men. They faced 5 German divisions, over 45,000 troops, nearly 3-to-1 odds. The Germans had tanks. The Americans inside Bastogne had almost none. Military analysts gave them 72 hours before they would be forced to surrender. Here is what made the situation truly desperate. The weather had turned against the Allies. Thick cloud cover prevented air support. Supply drops were impossible. The paratroopers were running out of everything: food, medicine, ammunition. On December 22nd, the German Commander General Heinrich von Leutwitz, Heinrich von Leutwitz, sent surrender terms to Bastogne. The American reply, delivered by Acting Commander Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, became legend. One word: nuts. It was defiance, it was courage, but it was also a death sentence without relief. And relief seemed impossible. The nearest major American force was Patton's Third Army, over 100 miles to the south, engaged in heavy combat near the Saar region, fighting its own offensive toward Germany. Standard military doctrine said that disengaging a force from combat, reorienting it, and moving it that distance would take at minimum 1 week, more likely 2, and that was in good weather. The weather was not good. The Ardennes was experiencing one of the worst winters in recorded European history. Temperatures dropped to 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Roads were sheets of ice. Visibility was measured in yards, not miles. Every general in the Allied command structure believed relief was days away, maybe longer, every general except one. December 19, 1944, the city of Verdun, France. Eisenhower had called an emergency meeting of all senior Allied commanders. The atmosphere was grim. Maps showed the German advance spreading like a cancer across Belgium. Bradley's headquarters had been overrun. Communication lines were severed. For the first time since D-Day, there was genuine fear that the Allies might lose. Eisenhower opened with a statement that surprised everyone. The present situation is to be regarded as one of opportunity for us and not of disaster. Then he asked the critical question. When can you attack? He was looking at Patton. Here is what the other generals expected. A reasonable assessment, a discussion of logistics, a request for more time, more resources, more support. Here is what Patton said. I can attack with 3 divisions in 48 hours. The room went silent. General Omar Bradley later wrote in his memoirs that he thought Patton was joking. Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery's representative reportedly smirked. Even Eisenhower looked skeptical. 48 hours. To disengage 3 divisions from active combat, turn them 90 degrees, move them 100 miles through freezing blizzards, attack a fortified enemy position. The chief logistics officer spoke up. General, that's not possible. The road conditions alone, Patton cut him off. I've already started. This is what most people do not know about Patton's relief of Bastogne. He had seen it coming. 3 days before the German offensive began, Patton's intelligence officer, Colonel Oskar Koch, had warned him that something was happening in the Ardennes. German radio traffic patterns were changing. Divisions were moving. While other commanders dismissed the warnings, Patton had quietly begun planning. On December 17th, the day after the German attack, Patton called his staff together. He gave them an order that seemed insane at the time. Prepare 3 plans, one for turning north immediately, one for turning northeast, one for a northern attack through Arlon toward Bastogne. His staff worked through the night. They prepared march routes, calculated fuel requirements, identified supply points, drafted orders. When Patton walked into the Verdun meeting, he was not making a promise. He was reporting on a plan already in motion. At 11 a.m. on December 19th, Patton picked up a telephone in the Verdun headquarters. He called his chief of staff, General Hobart Gay. He spoke one sentence, "Play ball." That was the code phrase. His army began to move. Think about what this meant. Third Army was not a small force. It consisted of over 200,000 men, thousands of vehicles, hundreds of tanks, miles of supply trucks. All of this had to be extracted from combat, turned around, and sent in a completely new direction. And Patton had given them 48 hours. His divisional commanders thought it was madness. General John Milliken, commanding the 3rd Corps, later said he believed the order was impossible to execute. General Manton Eddy of the 12th Corps asked if there was a misprint in the timeline. There was no misprint. Patton gathered his commanders and delivered one of the most remarkable speeches of the war. We do not have the exact words recorded, but witnesses remembered the essence. This is the chance we have been waiting for. The Germans have stuck their heads in a meat grinder, and I am going to turn the handle. We are going to kill German soldiers. We are going to relieve our comrades. And we are going to do it faster than anyone believes possible, because we are the 3rd Army. And the 3rd Army does not fail. The attack would begin December 22nd at 6 a.m. They had 72 hours to prepare. December 20th, 1944, 100 hours. Night operations began. The 4th Armored Division received orders to disengage from their positions near Saarbrücken. They had been fighting toward the Siegfried Line for weeks. Now they were told to reverse course entirely. The division commander, Major General Hugh Gaffey, faced an immediate problem. His tanks were spread across a 20-mile front. Getting them consolidated would take time they did not have. Gaffey made a decision that defined the operation. He ordered units to move as they stood ready. No waiting for full assembly. Tanks, half-tracks, and infantry would stream northward in waves. They would consolidate on the march. It was chaotic. It was unconventional. It worked. By dawn on December 20th, the first elements of the 4th Armored were already 40 miles from their starting positions. Let us talk about what these men faced. The roads were not roads. They were frozen rivers of mud and ice. Tanks slid into ditches. Trucks jackknifed on curves. The Ardennes terrain was heavily forested, with narrow, winding paths never designed for military traffic. Temperatures averaged 8 degrees Fahrenheit. Many soldiers did not have winter boots. Frostbite casualties mounted by the hour. Men stuffed newspapers into their clothing for insulation, and yet they kept moving. December 20th, afternoon. General Patton established a forward command post at Luxembourg City. He wanted to be as close to the action as possible. His staff set up in a former bank building. Patton paced constantly, barking orders, demanding updates. At 1600 hours, he received troubling news. The 26th Infantry Division was falling behind schedule. Their trucks were breaking down in the cold. Replacement parts were still in depot. Patton's response was immediate. He ordered maintenance crews to cannibalize disabled vehicles, take what worked, leave the rest. Speed was everything. December 21st. The 4th Armored Division reached Arlon, Belgium. They were now in position to begin the attack toward Bastogne, but there was a problem. Intelligence reports showed German forces had established multiple defensive lines between Arlon and Bastogne. The enemy knew relief attempts would come. They were preparing. The 4th Armored would have to fight through approximately 15 miles of defended territory. In summer conditions against a static enemy, this might take 2 to 3 days. In winter, against determined resistance, longer. Patton gave them 1 day. December 22nd. 6 a.m. the attack began. Combat Command B of the 4th Armored Division led the assault. They hit the first German defensive line at the village of Martelange, Martel Ahnge. German infantry had demolished the bridge over the Schur River. Engineers rushed forward under fire. They constructed a temporary crossing in 4 hours, a task that normally took 12. By noon, American tanks were across the river and pushing north. Now here is where I need you to understand the German perspective. Because what happened next shocked them. General von Leutwitz, commanding the siege of Bastogne, received reports throughout December 22nd. American forces were moving, but his staff assured him there was no cause for alarm. Relief would take days, plenty of time to force Bastogne's surrender. Then reports started coming faster. Americans at Martelange. Americans pushing through Warnack. Americans at Holland. By nightfall on December 22nd, the 4th Armored had advanced 8 miles. They had broken through 2 German defensive lines. They had captured over 1,000 prisoners. Von Leutwitz began repositioning forces. He pulled units from the siege to face the new threat. This reduced pressure on Bastogne, exactly as Patton had intended. December 23rd. The weather broke. For the first time in days, the clouds parted. Allied aircraft filled the skies. C-47 transport planes dropped supplies to the besieged garrison at Bastogne. Fighter bombers struck German positions across the bulge, but the ground advance slowed. German resistance stiffened around the village of Chaumont, Mohn. The 4th Armored faced their toughest fighting yet. Patton drove forward to observe personally. His command vehicle came under artillery fire near Arlon. An aide urged him to take cover. Patton refused. He stood in his jeep watching American tanks engage German positions. A fragment from a near miss struck his vehicle. Patton did not flinch. By nightfall on December 23rd, the 4th Armored had advanced another 5 miles. They were now 6 miles from Bastogne, but German resistance was fierce. Casualties were mounting. December 24th, Christmas Eve. The 4th Armored Division faced a critical moment. They were exhausted. They had been fighting without rest for 3 days. Vehicle maintenance was becoming critical. Fuel was running low. Patton called General Gaffey with a simple message. There will be no stopping. Get to Bastogne. Combat Command Reserve, led by Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, yes, the same Abrams for whom the modern tank is named, received orders to find a way through. Abrams identified a secondary road that German defenses had not fully covered. He led a column of tanks and armored infantry on a flanking maneuver. They pushed through the village of Bastogne in a sharp firefight. By dusk on December 24th, Abrams's lead elements were within striking distance of Bastogne. December 25th, Christmas Day. Fighting continued through the night. The Germans, now aware of how close the Americans were, threw everything they had at stopping the advance. Tank battles erupted in the frozen fields. Artillery exchanges lit up the darkness. At 1600 hours on Christmas Day, the unthinkable happened. Lead elements of Combat Command Reserve made contact with the 101st Airborne perimeter. The siege of Bastogne was broken. December 26th, the formal link-up. At approximately 11:45 a.m., the main relief column rolled into Bastogne. The 4th Armored Division had covered 15 miles of heavily defended territory in 4 days of continuous combat. But the overall operation, from initial movement to relief, had taken almost exactly what Patton promised. 48 hours from first attack to breakthrough. Let us talk numbers, because the statistics of Patton's relief of Bastogne remain staggering to military historians. In the movement phase, the Third Army relocated over 130,000 soldiers. They moved approximately 62,000 vehicles. They transporting over 200,000 tons of supplies. All in less than 72 hours, all in freezing winter conditions. In the combat phase between December 22nd and December 26th, the Third Army engaged and defeated elements of 5 German divisions. They captured approximately 12,500 prisoners. They destroyed over 100 German tanks and armored vehicles. American casualties were significant. Approximately 4,000 killed, wounded, or missing. But the strategic result was decisive. The siege of Bastogne had lasted 6 days. Military intelligence had predicted relief would take 2 to 3 weeks. Patton did it in less than 1. Here is what most histories do not emphasize. The relief of Bastogne did not just save the 101st Airborne. It broke the back of the entire German offensive. By holding Bastogne, the Americans denied the Germans' use of 7 critical road junctions. This created massive traffic problems for German supply lines. Tanks ran out of fuel. Infantry outran their support. The offensive's momentum collapsed. And Patton's relief attack did more than just break the siege. It created a new threat that the Germans had to address. They were forced to pull units from their advance to defend against Patton. This weakened their spearheads, slowed their progress. By December 28th, the German offensive was effectively finished. They would fight on for weeks, but the chance for strategic victory was gone. And the Germans knew exactly who to blame. General Fritz Bayerlein, commander of the elite Panzerlehr Division, was captured later in the war. In interrogation, he was asked about facing Patton. His response was recorded verbatim. We knew when we were fighting the Third Army. There was a ferocity, a speed. The others would attack and wait. Patton attacked and kept attacking. He gave us no time to reorganize, no time to breathe. It was exhausting just trying to defend against him. When asked specifically about Bastogne, Bayerlein shook his head. We calculated we had 1 week before relief could arrive. 1 week to force surrender. Patton gave us 4 days. Less than 4 days. No one believed it was possible. Our intelligence said it was impossible. They were wrong. In the months and years after the war, American intelligence officers conducted extensive interviews with captured German generals. They wanted to understand the enemy perspective. What had worked? What had failed? Who had impressed them? One name came up repeatedly: George Patton. General Gunther Blumentritt, Chief of Staff to von Rundstedt, was interviewed in 1945. The transcript survives in the National Archives. He was asked which Allied commander the Germans most feared. His answer was unequivocal: Patton, without question. He was the most aggressive, the most daring. We always had to consider where Patton was, what he might do. He did not fight by the book. He rewrote the book while fighting. When asked about Bastogne specifically, Blumentritt provided remarkable detail. Our intelligence tracked all major Allied units. We knew where Patton was. We knew he was engaged in the Saar, 100 miles south. We calculated, based on standard military doctrine, that he could not possibly intervene at Bastogne for at least 10 days. Probably longer. The weather, the roads, the logistics, it was not possible to move faster. He paused, according to the interrogator's notes. Then we learned he was already attacking Bastogne after 3 days. 3 days. We checked the reports. We thought there was an error. There was no error. Patton had done what we believed was impossible. But perhaps the most revealing confession came from General von Manteuffel himself. The man who commanded the Panzer Army that nearly destroyed American forces in the Ardennes. In post-war interviews conducted for the U.S. Army's Historical Division, von Manteuffel spoke extensively about the battle. He credited German planning, praised his soldiers' courage, analyzed what went wrong. But when the subject turned to Patton, his tone changed. I fought the Russians for 3 years. The Eastern Front was a war of movement. We moved fast. The Russians moved fast. I thought I understood mobile warfare, he continued. Then I faced Patton. He was different. The Russians were relentless but predictable. Patton was neither. He appeared where he should not be. He attacked when he should be defending. He moved when he should be resting. The interviewer asked about Bastogne directly. Von Manteuffel's response has been quoted in military academies ever since. When we surrounded Bastogne, we believed we had time, days, perhaps a week. We would reduce the pocket, force surrender, secure the crossroads, then continue the advance. This was logical, this was doctrine. Patton did not follow doctrine, he followed his instincts, and his instincts told him to move faster than any army had ever moved in such conditions. When his tanks appeared at Bastogne, we knew. We knew the offensive had failed, not because of Bastogne itself, but because if Patton could do this, he could do anything. We could not predict him. And you cannot defeat an enemy you cannot predict. Field Marshal von Rundstedt, the overall German commander in the West, was captured in May 1945. In one of his first interrogations, he was asked to assess Allied generals. His response was brief but emphatic. Patton, he is your best. When pressed to elaborate, von Rundstedt reportedly said, he has the instinct for war, the audacity. Most generals calculate, Patton feels, and he is usually right. These were not defeated men offering flattery to their captors. These were professional soldiers, men who had fought across Europe and Russia, men who had faced the best armies in the world, and they were confessing with evident respect that they had never faced anyone quite like George Patton. The relief of Bastogne did not end the Battle of the Bulge. Fighting continued through January 1945. The Germans launched counterattacks. The Allies pushed back. Thousands more died in the frozen forests. But December 26, 1944 marked the turning point. The moment when German hopes for the offensive died, strategic impact. The failure at Bastogne prevented the Germans from reaching the Meuse River, their intermediate objective. Without the Meuse crossings, Antwerp was unreachable. Without Antwerp, the entire offensive was pointless. More importantly, the Germans expended their last strategic reserves: the tanks, the fuel, the trained soldiers. These were resources Hitler could not replace. When the Bastogne operation failed, Germany's ability to conduct major offensive operations ended. The war would last another 5 months. But after Bastogne, the outcome was certain. Military doctrine impact. Patton's relief operation rewrote textbooks on mobile warfare. The idea that a large force could disengage from combat, reorient, and attack in a new direction within 48 hours became a standard of military planning. Today, the operation is studied at West Point, at Sandhurst, at military academies worldwide, not just as history, as a template. The U.S. Army's doctrine of rapid force projection traces directly to Patton's innovations. The ability to move quickly and strike unexpectedly remains a cornerstone of American military thinking. But there is something more, something beyond statistics and doctrine. You are probably wondering why the German generals were so forthcoming. Why they praised an enemy who had defeated them. Because soldiers, even enemy soldiers, recognize excellence. Von Manteuffel, Bayerlein, Blumentritt, von Rundstedt. These were not ordinary men. They had survived the deadliest war in history. They had commanded hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They knew what military genius looked like, and they saw it in Patton. There is a code among professional soldiers, respect for competence that transcends national boundaries. The German generals who confessed their admiration for Patton were not betraying their country. They were acknowledging a truth that all warriors recognize. In war, there are those who follow the rules, and there are those who rewrite them. Patton rewrote them at Bastogne. Let us also remember what this cost. 4,000 American casualties in the relief operation alone. Men who froze to death in tanks. Men who bled out on icy roads. Men who never saw Christmas with their families. The German losses were worse. 12,000 prisoners. Thousands more killed. Young men who believed in their cause, however misguided. Sons, brothers, fathers. This is what the German generals also confessed. That war, even brilliantly conducted war, is tragedy. Von Manteuffel lost his own nephew at Bastogne. Bayerlein's division was shattered and never recovered. When Bayerlein praised Patton's speed and aggression, he was also acknowledging how many of his own men died because of it. Genius in war is not clean, it is not glorious, it is efficiency in destruction. Patton was a genius, and his genius killed thousands. We should remember both truths. In 48 hours, George Patton moved an army 100 miles through freezing blizzard, broke the siege of Bastogne, and captured over 10,000 German prisoners. His own generals thought it was impossible. Allied intelligence thought it was impossible. The Germans were certain it was impossible. Patton did it anyway. And when the German generals who faced him sat in interrogation rooms after the war, they could not explain how. They could only confess what they saw. An enemy who moved faster than doctrine allowed, who attacked when defense was expected, who won by refusing to accept limitations. Patton, von Rundstedt said, he is your best. If you found this story compelling, you need to hear what happened next. How Patton crossed the Rhine before Montgomery. How he beat the Russians to Bavaria. And what happened in that mysterious car accident that killed him just months after his greatest victory. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Thanks for watching.